Hey everyone, welcome back. Alex here today, and I want to do a video about Steam. One of the big problems that I see Steam having, both with itself and to a large extent with the PC and video game community. Now, Steam is an incredible platform. It is an extremely successful platform. In fact, in many ways, I think a lot of people would argue that the success of Steam has essentially changed Valve as a gaming company into kind of a software utility company. I think maybe that's the best way to describe Steam. It's actually kind of a utility rather than, a form of entertainment in and of itself. For anyone who is a fan of Valve, all you have to say is 3 words to demonstrate the change in direction that Valve has taken. Half-Life 3. You can thank Steam, I think, for the fact that Half-Life 3 has never, and probably will never, come out. Because Valve just simply stopped being a video game company and is now a very successful video game utility in many ways. Now, when I want to compare this, I want to compare Steam and the problem it's having with another company from a long time ago. Now, the problem I'm referring to is the absolute avalanche, this absolute wave of video game titles that gets released that no one never even knows about. Video game titles that could be good, could be diamonds in the rough, but so many that are just reskins or knockoffs of other titles where they essentially just copy a game, slap some new graphics on it, maybe change up the sound a bit, and release it. And it's like, oh, hey, this is great. But it's not. It's just a knockoff, and sometimes it's a knockoff of a knockoff. It gets absolutely nuts. There's no control. There's no quality control in trying to keep back this flood and helping the consumer navigate this colossal sea of video game titles that could be great or could be not. Now, we have some help with reviews and things like that, and people can put reviews of the video game titles. So it does help filter a tiny bit the good from the bad. But just the sheer number is completely daunting for the consumer and is completely damaging for the developers that really do make their titles, trying to make a unique title. Because when they release their title, if it's just in this flood of titles that gets released on a monthly basis, like something in the thousands, then, unless you're a top 20 title of that month or a AAA title, or you get a lot of coverage or press, then no one even knows about your title. And your title could fail, your studio can fail, your company can fail. Releasing a video game in this day and age, particularly on the Steam platform, is a very risky proposition. If you're a studio that has no pedigree, that has no history, that has no previous titles with which to bring in a set number of customers from the get-go. They have no history. If you're trying to be a new studio breaking in, Steam is an incredibly difficult platform to try and be successful in. In fact, you're just going to get lost in a sea of titles that no one knows anything about. This problem here is the problem, as I mentioned, that happened to another historical company, and that was Atari. Atari in the early 1980s. It's almost exactly the same situation. Atari had the most successful console ever released up to that point. Now, granted, the video game industry, the video game market was very, very young at that time. It was maybe around for 5 or 6 years. It was a very new technology. Computers were a very new technology. Very few homes at that time had a computer. If they had a computer, it was a do-it-yourself kit that more technically minded people had to put together. But there were computers in the 1970s and there were computers in the 1980s. But Atari made a specific device that could play video games that all you had to do was put in the cartridge, turn on the TV, and you were good to go. And it was just revolutionary at the time. Again, granted, they were not the first ones to do it, but they were the most successful at doing it. So Atari just became this huge hit, both in the arcades and at home. And they tried to capitalize on this brand new and highly successful and highly captured market at that time by releasing lots of games. And they fell into this quantity versus quality type of mindset where, okay, people love games. As long as we release more games, we'll become more successful. This, of course, today, hearing this is just absolutely nuts. But back then, no one really knew what the video game market was. And that video game players were very aware of quality versus quantity. And when you get a video game that you paid good money for, whether it's in 1982 or 83 or 2018, the analysis is the same. You know, back then you would pay, say, the equivalent of today of like $40 or $45. You want something really worthwhile for that investment. And it is an investment. You're not going to get that money back. That is a purchase that you're going to get for some amount of entertainment that you're expecting. And when that entertainment is not delivered, then you start to take a pretty negative view on the money that you spent and who you spent it to. And that's what Atari found themselves in that situation. So what happened? A slew of just games just came out in 1982, 83, and particularly in 1983, where the consumer had no idea if they were getting a good game or a bad game, and the market got absolutely flooded, and they had far overstretched, at that time, the purchasing power of their marketplace. And because everyone didn't know what they were buying, whether it was just shovelware or a really unique intellectual property, they just stopped buying games. They said, I don't know if this is a good game or a bad game, but I'm not going to risk $40 on a bad game. And they held on to their money. And the video game market crashed. Of course, we have the very famous story of E.T. That was really the final stake in the heart of Atari. But yeah, it was going on for a little while by that point. You know, something like that doesn't kill a whole market. It is a series of missteps in judging the market and trying to have some control over the publishers, because Atari was at that time, very freewheeling, very almost kind of hippie type of culture type of company, which was actually one of the things that made it very unique. It could, do just about anything. There were no rules. It was a free, open type of distribution and marketing and intellectual property system. If you can make a game, you can publish the game. And there was no quality control at all. And that's what doomed Atari in 1983. That same effect is what I'm seeing with Steam today. Steam is falling into the same habits and the same pattern that I saw. Of course, I was way too young back then. I didn't see it when I was in 1983. But from what I know, that Atari had done in the early 1980s. Now, is this going to kill Steam? No. There is at least some filtering in Steam where the top games will still be found. But if you are an independent publisher, you're trying to publish on Steam, you're going to essentially fail if you're trying to do a new game, unless you really get some exposure, you really get some press, get some good coverage, maybe get some YouTube videos, maybe get some YouTube commentary from some of the big YouTube personalities out there to generate some influence. Of course, that's where the term influencers come from, is for YouTube creators, but to generate some publicity and some recognition, some knowledge of the product that you're working on. And that is what drives Steam sales. That's where you see games such as a Darkest Dungeon, a Broforce, Enemy Mind, a whole slew of others here that, frankly, I would not have found unless I had watched some of my favorite YouTubers, whether it's Mighty Jingles or Extra Credits with their Games You Might Not Have Tried series. I would not have found any of these games. They had to go filter them for me before I picked them up, because I know and I trust their opinion to pick up some good games, and they have not been wrong yet. And they gave me the reasons why they're good, and I've been very happy. But without them, would I have ever picked up these games? No. No, I would have stuck with the games that I knew, with the intellectual properties that I knew. And of course, if you saw my video on the recent Command and Conquer announcement, if you always stick with the properties that you know, you're also liable to be disappointed when there's a sequel that does not meet the expectation of that audience. So Steam, is it the next Atari? Is it going to crash the PC market? I don't think so. First of all, there's actually competition. There's good old games. There's Origin for you EA fans out there. And there's a few other things that are out there that you can get some good games. Green Man Gaming, another one. Also, there is a lot more of commentary, reviews that can help pull up the games that are that need recognition, that are being released, that need to be recognized. This is not a danger for the PC game consumer, but this is a danger for the PC game developer. Because if you don't have the recognition, and Steam is really the only game out there, pun intended, they're the only service out there that has the huge, broad audience that you want to reach, and you don't reach it, you're done for. Yeah. With the console market, PlayStation, Nintendo, and Microsoft, the Xbox platform, you have more of a chance to get in front of your customers. And right now, I think, as a video game developer, it is easier to launch and release on consoles than it is on Steam. Why do I say easier? Because it's actually not. What I mean is, it's easier for you to survive and be successful on a console than it is on Steam, unless you have that big recognition that you need to become successful on Steam. If you don't have it, then you need some help, and you need to be on a dedicated platform. And a lot of times, companies such as Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, if you bring a really good idea, really good property, and you get somewhat developed that you can show an alpha build or a prototype build, and you grasp on it, they'll help push you over the edge. They will help, get you onto their market, because in this case, and I saw particularly with Nintendo, if you succeed, they succeed. In Steam's case, if you don't succeed, it doesn't matter to Steam. But in particular with companies such as Nintendo, and now to extent Microsoft, where they are either struggling with first-party titles, in the case of Microsoft, or they're struggling with third-party titles, as in the case with Nintendo, because they have such a unique platform that a lot of titles are not easily crossed over from PlayStation and Xbox onto now the Nintendo Switch. You have a much more captive audience. You have a much better chance of succeeding with a console. But it is harder, in a sense, that you do have to go through quality control. You do have to go through hoops to get there. But that barrier is helping you, because if you get through it, you have a much higher chance of succeeding rather than going onto Steam, where there are very few barriers to entry, but you're going to get lost in the flood, which is what happened to the Atari publishers back in the early 1980s. So this is my take on Steam. I do like the Steam service. I think it's a great service. But I realize it's so broad. It's such a broad net right now that if you're a developer, you really have to take the time to really see if Steam is the right platform for you. If you're a customer, it's difficult to find diamonds in the rough with Steam unless you have some guide to help you find these diamonds in the rough. Yeah. Also, never mind, it's so easy to get titles that you may have tens or even hundreds of titles that you don't even play. Right now, I haven't bought a new game in 6 months, but I'm still looking at a backlog of probably about 50 games just on Steam right now. Some of them I haven't even opened yet. And it's summertime, so we got the Steam Summer Sale coming up. So I'll probably add to it even more. So Steam is a very unique platform. But sometimes you have to see it for what it is. And again, the word of warning is actually more for developers than for players. But it's still there. And I think it's something to recognize. Now, am I going to switch from PC to console? Well, I do play console a little bit. But console is a pretty big investment for me right now, with just money I don't have at this point. So my consoles are actually a generation behind. And that's actually why I'm on PC now, and all the videos I do are on PC games, because it's actually up to date. But it's a pretty cool platform. So anyways, that's my thoughts on Steam. I think it's a unique thing, but if I would encourage anything, it would be Valve to put in more quality control in the titles that get released, because there's a huge flood that's coming in, and a lot of titles just don't deserve to be on Steam. You don't need to be anything to everyone. They've released the floodgates. They followed the same model as Atari, and they're now going to have to deal with a lot of the issues that Atari had at that time. They're not going to kill the whole market. They're not, completely dominant, and the market's not so small. The market is now completely huge, but it's definitely something that Steam needs to be aware of, and that a competing platform comes up that follows more of the Nintendo model of the 1980s, where they do have quality control, and the games that you're going to see on that competing platform are good, and you're not going to, find a lousy game, then that could be a real competition. That could be a real competition for Steam. So, just something to be aware of. Anyways, that's my thoughts on Steam, guys. Feel free to let me know if you have any comments. What's your perspective on it? What do you think of Steam, or what do you think of good old gaming and those type of platforms, and what they've done to the PC industry? One thing is that everything is now digital. We don't have any box releases anymore, and that's kind of unfortunate. Sometimes I like to have a nice box I can put on the shelf with a manual and all this other stuff. Now everything is digital, and we kind of lose that. We don't have a physical object that we can take, and people like having physical things that they can put on the shelf or they could hold in their hands. We can't do that anymore with software. So that's another aspect of Steam to take into account. So anyways, again, that's a side tangent. But anyways, just want to let you guys know what I think about this. And if you like the channel, please subscribe to the channel. And also feel free to take a look at the Patreon page if you want to support me in continuing some more videos. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care. Have fun. I'll talk to you soon.